Sup Shredders, my name is Logan aka Spiderhands and welcome to an SP Reviews, where today we have ourselves a few tracks from an act named Millie Sievert and a Radioactive 5 off of the Nothing 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 album. And if we switch over to here, we have ourselves a track on the screen, this first one titled Drawing the Moon Silent. We're going to be listening to this today, as well as Final Perch to Peregrines, as well as Alchemy featuring eNuminous and Archimedes, who I've also reviewed music for in the past and had a good time with. And we're going to listen through this track from start till finish, and we're going to hear what we think. Let's go, let's do it. Make it full screen. Or is it better the other way? Alright, and just to let you all know if you're not familiar, apparently these are all edited and mastered with cut and paste AI as I understand it. Fantastic shift there.
Abstraction cannot hold epiphanies, the churches all around in the quiet times of mother's embrace, the rhythmic flowered choreography of scent, a global dance. Sun in our basket, you kill us, we shun you, we scream you, we leave our fathers behind, making ghosts of the words we leave unread in books, chucking them into your furnace, in the seashore of total rapture, swimming with the tides and the failures of pattern and structure. One can admonish the moon no longer and find the cooling of the sunless sands and be the one that pulls the moon down.
Okay, so this is poetry cut on top of some of the, like, if this is AI based, if there's AI, anything AI related to it in regards to the vocals or instrumentation, it's incredibly authentic and real sounding. It's getting to the point where it is getting very difficult to tell. When there's some like kind of fragmenting going on with the vocals, I sort of kind of helped to figure that out a little bit, but aside from that, yeah. So is that like a cymbal shimmer or something?
Showing the faces that change, be still and silent, granite and ratio. Fevers of abstraction cannot hold epiphanies, the churches all around in the quiet times of mother's embrace, the rhythmic flower. us behind, making ghosts of the words we leave unread in books.
It's how to describe this mix? I think that like the vocals are done well with this, drawing the moon silent. I'm not sure entirely what's going on there. We talk about the eternal rapture at some point or along the lines and like the moon, bring the moon and everything like that. So in regards to the actual track itself, we also talk about mother's embrace and everything like that. I'm not sure how much is to do with what else. I think like with a song like this where there is poetry behind it, you know, like innate kind of like double meanings to certain parts and everything like that, I don't think it's literal across the board. It's like you kind of need to be able to sort of associate what's going on with that poetry within the track itself, with a mixture of different drum, bass, and sort of like noise, sort of synthy noise elements there with an extra kind of whoosh there, which I thought initially was like a cymbal shimmer, but I think was more of just kind of like a misty effect. And where we have guitars, distorted guitars, basses, and drums, as well as some interesting sort of like string parts, some compelling melodies there. The vocal melodies and harmonies are interesting to listen throughout. They're easy to sort of digest, and I think that ultimately, for the most part, the vocals, the lines that come in there, the way they're sung, they make sense with the relative consistency of the dynamics of the instruments around them. There are some unusual note choices outside of the major minor triads there which don't sound alien. They work chromatically. They make it a bit more sort of zazzy sounding. There's some like harmonica melodic minors in there. But there's also times like at the beginning and like later on where things kind of go down and you're left with the vocalist, I suppose, Millie, just kind of singing on their own, and you're kind of left with more of a somber kind of feel to it rather than when things come up again with the guitar, bass, drums, and everything like that. It's like there's like some sort of like quiet right-handed keys on the end as well, kind of twinkling in sub layers there. I think that the track itself, it's more about maybe trying to silence the moon, the act of maybe doing that, and the consequences that have either led to that occurring or that come from that. You know, maybe that was about the moon and their relationship with like the sun or something like that. Maybe that was about drawing a sun, I'm not quite sure. But either way, most of it sounded like real instruments there. There was a bit of filtering, a bit of fragmentation or something like that occasionally, but nothing which was too sort of like dramatic or it's kind of distracting. It was a solid piece of music. I think there were some occasional points where the vocals came in at a certain point where like they kind of stopped and like we just kind of banged into something. I didn't necessarily know if that transferred neatly, but still a really good start to this album. And again, having listened to Mona Lisa previously and another track off of this, you know, there's some promising stuff in here. And then we've got track number 2 titled Final Perch to Peregrines.
Before the throne,
Two woodwinds there. Interesting triplet group of the sub and mains. Yeah, that's a bit rough. So we had like a triplet groove instantiated with the bum 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 with the bass line going up the octave there, and that was easy to follow along to. Sounded like the woodwinds that we had there were kind of coalescing with that in the way which was sensible. The various vocal layers were kind of going between one another, corresponding, you know, coming in together. It's just this part here with the drums. Maybe we're deliberately going to shift from that, but It's just the drums. Aside from this music box part works. No, I'm not really sure if I particularly cared for this one. I think that as a concept, it's interesting if we're trying to instantiate a sense of chaos there. I didn't really get the words through clearly. Of angels. Yeah, it's that sometimes you have these kind of fluttering strings and they go into a similar range of the vocalist, and then like they kind of harmonize or say different words on top of each other. I think it works when you have a main focal point, like the vocals, and you have different vocals kind of juxtaposing that and contrasting occasionally. Without an additional layer, they're in a similar frequent part of the frequency spectrum to sort of like intermingle with that as well. I think that we're trying to do quite a lot in this track. I'm switching between a triplet groove with some of the parts there, moving on the sort of like strings, moving into sort of a more dedicated 4/4 drum beat there with kick snares and hi-hats there. Woodwind, the legato parts on the woodwinds, as well as some of the music box part we had were a bit more peaceful later on. It became a sort of bit twisted and demented near the end with the way things kind of sounded like an LP skipping or kind of burning. I think the actual singing themselves, like, it was great. The tone of the vocalist was nice, you know, like it was easy to listen to that, even if it was a bit confusing to understand what was going on. They're talking about kind of floating around like angels and everything like that, and the dust around the place and filling ears and all that. So I'm kind of wondering whether it's someone being sort of like manipulated by someone and put in a position where they feel like they can fly and everything like that, and maybe they're not actually meant to or something like that. Maybe it's their final perch. Maybe if they fly one more time, they're not going to be able to do it again. There might be a sense of danger as per the sort of dissolution and sort of mangling of the actual theme at the end. I think like as a concept, it's just too compositionally complicated to really be able to sort of sit with it, like aside from with the understanding that it's meant to be this kind of chaotic and sort of unusual there. That maybe this is the thought process of the person inside their own sort of mystified or stupefied illusion. And it's almost kind of fantasy-like there, where like once you stop talking or once you stop thinking about the situation, once the thoughts stop spinning around in your head, you end up inevitably sort of falling over and not being able to fly again. The leveling and stuff in the mix was fine. Again, like the music box did kind of sound like we were falling to sleep, and when we fell asleep, you know, I assumed that things would kind of go badly. This was through composed. And I think that it works well as that if you understand it's not meant to necessarily be a pleasurable listen. It's probably one of the hardest pieces of sort of feedback I've had on a track from eNuminous and Archimedes as well as Millie Sievert, but it's just sounded it's a bit too unusual for me. I personally want more of a connection between the elements and a set direction for stuff. That's a personal sort of a feel-based thing, I suppose. As an experiment with AI and kind of sort of how they sort of interact with each other and trying to sort of like progressive or avant-garde stuff, though, I think it works quite well. And then we have the final track for today, Alchemy, featuring eNuminous and Archimedes.
Drawing back futility breaks the dove spines, anchors them to the shrieking rocks. Finger full of lost equator, spilling pentameter, the Rhine bites. Nothing.
Nice of a callback to the album here, I suppose. A little bit edge to that chromatic there, but that's fine.
In the halls of shadow and in the darkness, sunlight beacons, something sunlight owns ahead.
So that made sense to me, having that big sort of orchestral drum kind of dum. That movement there, the roll, to indicate a new transition into something. I could get behind that.
Winds reaching out to grasp in the throes of nothing. A handful of times where heartbeat, silence after the word, the empty drawing back futility breaks the dove's spines, anchors them to the shrieking rocks. Finger full of lost equator, spilling pentametabines.
Oh, it was so nice earlier on.
Nothing, nothing, all the hands. Moon swinging out to scatter fingerfuls of nothing. Volumes of empty, meaningless, blank phrases convey silence up to the word. Upon an awakening shouts cruelly echo from the slum's cries. Drawing like hawks, no silence yet breaking. Finger holds of shadow and the darkness on. Light beacons, something sunlight held firmly enemies. Something sunlight held firmly.
You see, their vocal harmonies are exquisite.
For me, so cold. Shadow and the darkness on. Light beacons, something sunlight held firmly enemies. Something sunlight held firmly.
Huge sense of dread from that, eh? I mean, it's a curious thing for me, because I'd want to know why the computer is deciding to do this.
Explaining.
I have questions about this. We're gonna talk about this track, this album overall in the conclusion, but just for this track alone, what do I think it's about? I think it's about someone who, well, it's about like the situation they're in. There is nothing, they're scattering nothing around the place, maybe because of the alchemy. It's resulted in an experiment that has kind of just destroyed everything. And maybe sunlight is when there is nothing and it's able to be sort of held and come through. And that's the cycle maybe of things being born, kind of growing things, and then inevitably getting to the point where they're nothing, they evaporate, and again the cycle becomes new. I'm not really quite sure how else to say that. I think that the way that we sung it, the AI sung it as I understand it, was solid there. We had some really interesting melodic and harmonic ideas there. The vocal harmonies were great, you know, had a great tone and texture to them. And it would be very difficult genuinely for me to tell that it was an AI if that was the case. It's getting to the point where it's very difficult to tell, as I mentioned earlier. I think some of the sort of the plucked string parts in that part were dope there. I thought it was nice to have the guitars, bass, and drums coming around the midpoint there to kind of bring things up in a similar way to the first track we had. I also appreciated the fact that we kind of just had a sort of more somber piano line there and plenty of dynamic range within this piece there, trying to sort of not go too far in one sort of polar direction or the other regards to the emotionality of it. It's almost like we've got a sort of grand sort of stance to it, especially with some of the sort of supposed kind of like, I don't know, there's a sense of awe with the harmonies and the overall sort of instrumentation of that build section with the sunlight part in that midsection there, almost like we're sort of paying homage and calling it sort of glorious. There we go, glorious, that's the word I was looking for. We have these really uncomfortable kind of sort of tremolo kind of string parts there where they kind of flutter and they rise up like a horror movie, and we had that for like a minute near the end of the track, and it slowly faded out, as well as the vocals even further underneath that, almost like the strings were smothering that sunlight, that hope, the dreams that someone had for a better life. I think ultimately the track had really fascinating, like the studio mixing, mastering, production was fine. And there was one part, I think, where I started to become a little bit kind of frustrated because like we were kind of going away from the kind of really interesting kind of like cool motif we had at the start. I'm interested in seeing something in like a different sort of like meter or like rhythm or something. Not that I think music needs to revolve around what I want. It's just I was really enjoying it. And after the previous track, I was hoping things would be a bit more kind of constant, especially with a 5-minute track. But nonetheless, experimentation is totally okay. I'm going to talk about these more in the conclusion. Because welcome to the conclusion of my review of this track from an act named Millie Sievert on the Radioactive 5 titled Nothing, Nothing. These tracks that we reviewed today being Drawing the Moon, Silent, Final Perch, and 2 Peregrines, and Alchemy featuring eNuminous and Archimedes. Now, if I'm honest, I'm not really sure specifically what these tracks are about. The lyrics are complicated. Like, there are some words that are very clear and straightforward, but I'd probably need to actually read the poetry through in its full context to really understand or get a greater sort of like idea of it. I feel like I'm missing the key points there, and I hesitate to have a surefire sort of opinion on what they're about aside from what I've discussed. I think we're sort of suggesting sort of like concepts that we're exploring in each track there. The Millie Sievert is exploring and vocalizing with proper vocal technique. I mean, like, the performance is very convincing there. We're very comfortable in head and chest voice there. Sounds like a weird thing to say in a situation, but yeah. And we had some really great harmonies as well, not only with the major and minors, also some sus harmonies as well, some suspended ones there for a bit of regality and sense of glory to it. Very bright and charming there. The second track, Final Perch, had 2 voices kind of going at each other, and there was sort of like thoughts and main thoughts, and there was like thoughts swirling around your head. So I'm wondering if that's the angle they were going through there, and I think that inevitably worked quite well there. It wasn't the same approach to the way we did the singing the entire time. We varied our between the tracks to make them, I suppose, more distinct, and I think that was effective. But yeah, I'm not necessarily sure what the tracks are about, but they nonetheless appreciate the effort to make it compelling with the sung parts. I think that these tracks, like, they were a ride, man. They were a trip. Specifically, Final Perch. It was a bit too complicated for me. Like, a lot of it was like this big sort of like long form through composed composition there. There were times where I kind of got more sort of traditional structures like piano accompaniments or bass guitar sort of drum parts there for heavier elements there. And there were also string parts and interesting woodwind compositions and stuff like that. And typically when we had a set rhythm or like groove that we were following, it was very easy to go along with the track and be able to sort of like respect and appreciate that. There were times where, like in Final Perch and occasion in Alchemy, where we just started maybe going like 4/4 in the middle of like a triplet part there. And I suppose I was just a bit sensitive to that, primarily because we're so close to having music that is almost inseparable from a lot of the sort of more human-made stuff, that's kind of like the thing that separates it. It's like, because I have more questions than answers. Is it a deliberate decision for the computer to deliberately switch the time signature up or the tempo up or whatever to kind of get that to work there? Is it a creative endeavor? Are we trying to literally figure out how to be creative, but in a way where like it how do I describe it? Are we trying to figure out how to be creative and only understanding potentially that we need to have a different sort of time signature or drum groove in order to be able to do that? A lot of questions about it, but again, eNuminous and Archimedes definitely know what they're doing in regards to this stuff. I have faith in them, and a lot of music I've heard, including in this album itself, are really solid. Mona Lisa was another great track. I think we were doing the thing in the first track where we have like the stanza and then we like the whole entire set of lyrics, and then we repeat the poetry in like the second half or something like that. We might have been doing it for the other two too, but I think ultimately when there were guitars, they were typically power chords. There might have been some lead elements there, but just the strength of those rhythm sections was fantastic and worked very well with the bass, whether it was underneath the guitars or separate on its own as like a way of sort of weighing us down and making things kind of murky sounding. The drums with the kick snare sort of cymbal grooves were great, and they were strong and they were competent there. We had some interesting interesting woodwind melodies in Final Perch. I appreciated legato phrasing on them, as well as the sort of like almost jazzy influences there. Some of the plucked string parts were very sort of dramatic and tense and made sense with the chord progressions and stuff like that we were using within the tracks. The keys that we had in parts like Alchemy at the start and then like later on as like little twinkles or something like that were kind of cute as well, as well as in parts like Final Perch. And honestly, like individually, the instrumental parts were compelling and I really appreciated them. And 9 times out of 10, we had a track or like a part of a song where like, even if there was a bit of kind of like quirkiness going on there, they still managed to fit together somehow. The vocals still kind of clung on to a dominant groove there or a dominant progression in it. And it's not like we had competing like lots of chromatics and flat seconds and stuff like that. It was purely just a rhythm or like phrasing thing on that part. I think that it's important to sort of like see how far you can stretch things and sort of like see what's possible and stuff. I just think purely from a listening perspective, I feel like it would have been arguably, actually I don't know if it would have been generally more enjoyable for everyone if there hadn't been that sort of switch up and out Final Perch with the 2 different sides. But I think for me personally, I would have preferred it to have been a little more consistent. Or if you're going to switch, do the thing you had in Alchemy, we're going with the orchestral drums and like illustrate that there's a change there. But then it's also relying on the AI potentially to be able to do that. So I understand it's more complicated than it may seem at first glance. You know, the track itself, like the 3 songs have a similar sort of like sound to them. They're different styles, but the vocals sound consistent throughout. The themes that we choose for them, I don't know how to describe it. I mean, like, I got the feeling, like if I take Alchemy, because that's the most recent one there, then the use of suspended and major and minors there, or power chords there, and for a less of a sense of emotionality to more of a kind of like just an assertion of power and stuff like that, and a respect for what we're discussing with the lack of anything, the nothing, and then the sunflowers and everything like that. Final Perch, you know, just sounded chaotic and incredibly intense and just kind of like a little bit too much for me, a little bit sort of like confusing, I suppose. And then drawing them in silent data to have another listen to really sort of like put that down to dust. But effectively, we clearly had our direction for each piece, and we put out the album, so we're clearly happy with it. And I think that for people who are trying to see how AI is going in regards to these facets, this is, if nothing else, this is a fantastic album or situation to show examples of them getting very, very, very close. Studio recording, mixing, mastering's tight. And there were differences in the vocal loudnesses and some of the parts there from Millie, but aside from that, you know, it's good, and that's just dynamic range. You know, it's okay if things are perceived differently. There was nothing in there in studio post that was particularly egregious there. I appreciate the clarity of elements in the mix, even if there was some digital fragmentation of some of the tracks there. The notching stuff in the frequency spectrum was tight. Things were nice and wide in the stereo field. Music surrounded you in the headphones. There was dynamic range to it. It wasn't the same loudness all the time. Some parts it was literally just vocals and plucked parts, and it was so effective how you came down immediately after that. Again, it's that kind of stuff where it's just smart music. It's just, I suppose it'd be difficult to kind of teach AI how to do that, but if they're using examples of music that they've come across to that, it's fine. I'm not saying this is that situation, but I know that some people use songs to train their AI and stuff like that. I'm not sure. I don't know how it works with AI music, but anyway, look, effectively, this is my review of this album. Nothing, 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 nothing from an actor named Millie Sievert and the Radioactive 5. I don't know if I was necessarily happy with everything, but I think most of it was fantastic, and I still feel like that's quite a positive review. So hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please go show us the love via the various social medias and the YouTube music page, and stay cool and stay safe. And please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as they need to help more than ever with the crazy stuff going on in the world. And I'll catch you in the next review. Spiderhands out.